Hey coffee nerds, check this out. This is the ceramic coffee filter dripper brewer. It's basically a filter and a dripper all in one. Is this magic or is it a menace? Could this be your path to a cleaner, crisper, smoother cup of coffee while also reducing paper wastage? Or do the numerous drawbacks outweigh the benefits? Well, I thought, why don't we make a brew and find out. As you can see, it kind of looks like your typical pour over, maybe slightly different, a bit more curvy here, but this one takes a ceramic filter as we've outlined. And so all the coffee is basically going through the entire filter at once, whereas maybe a more classic ceramic dripper like the V60 would usually take a paper filter like this. There are a few other companies making pretty much the same thing, but this one happens to be from a brand called Kuimon in Japan, and it's a ceramic filter that is not only porous, it's microporous. So there's basically only the purest liquid making its way through, or at least that's the claim, and then that's sitting inside another ceramic dripper that is non-porous at all, aside from a little hole in the very bottom which you can see the coffee dripping through. So the question is, does this dripper actually offer a sweeter, softer, more well-rounded brew, as well as an eco-friendly approach in comparison to regular drippers with a paper filter? Well, let's rewind a little bit just to give you some context. Why do I have this dripper? I actually won it in a competition. It was an AeroPress championship. I know this has nothing to do with the AeroPress, but it does have to do with coffee, and it was a very nice gift. So I've used it probably a total of 7 or 8 times in my life. So why isn't this my daily driver when it comes to coffee brewing? Well, let's give this a taste, and I'll explain to you some of my thoughts. Yeah, it's very smooth. It doesn't have that same kind of grittiness that you might get from a French press, which also doesn't use a paper filter. But when compared to other pour over methods with paper filtration, this somehow has a little bit more of a rounded texture. And there are quite a few claims that this ceramic specifically emits far infrared rays. Now, I'm not really an expert on this topic. I don't want to give too much of my opinion on something I don't know that much about, but in doing some research, it seems like these rays do have some benefits. That being said, I'm not quite sure I buy it. I'm not sure that these are specifically radiating these rays in order to revitalize the brew, but feel free to prove me wrong in the comments. I just couldn't find much on any of the websites that are selling these brewers. They just claimed that it had it, but they didn't quite explain how it works and that it actually does work. That's one thing to keep in mind. So why is this brewer not exactly my go-to? Well, quite honestly, I'm kind of afraid to break it. It doesn't seem quite as straightforward to just go out and buy a new filter if you happen to crack it or chip it. And even in terms of the brewing process, it just doesn't quite feel smooth and comfortable to hear that grinding. It feels a little bit more delicate, as you might expect. And the cleaning process itself is also another consideration when you're choosing a brewer to make coffee in the morning. So when it comes to cleaning, yeah, it's not too bad if you don't mind just flushing all these coffee grounds down your sink, or maybe you have some sort of sieve that you use, like when making a French press, or maybe even espresso in that case. And obviously it's not quite as easy as, let's say, an AeroPress or even a pour over V60, where you can just either pop the puck out or lift the paper filter out into your compost or something, right? So you've got to run this through, clean it with water. They recommend not using detergent or anything, and never use anything except for your fingers on this thing, because it will grab and catch on to anything you might use, whether it's a sponge, cloth, try it out for yourself, but that is a consideration. Could even catch on your clothes. And then what you have to do is make sure you run a lot of hot water through it as well. So there may be some fine particles, of course, oils, that kind of thing inside the very micro pores of the ceramic. And then once in a while, you may find that it's starting to clog up, right? It might not be dripping quite the same as it used to. You're using the same grind size, maybe even the same coffee. And that is the moment where you're going to have to take cleaning to the next level. That involves, per their recommendation, an open flame. Or you could boil it in water with a bit of baking soda or carbon bicarbonate or something like that. But the recommendation is to put it over a flame for around 15 minutes. That's going to burn and basically turn all that coffee into ash inside the micropores. And then you're gonna have to let it sit for around an hour before you start rinsing it out again, because if you rinse it out with cold or even hot water, it does have the propensity to crack. So again, it comes back to that delicacy of this brewer, you know, waiting another hour, coming back to it, rinsing it again with some hot water. Hopefully you got everything out. Maybe you're not sure. And so that's another consideration with the cleaning of this. Now, how often that might happen maybe depends on how often you use it, of course, and also the coffee that you're using. So all of this, obviously, it seems a little bit tedious, and it leads me to my last consideration here. Is this truly a zero waste brewer, or is it as eco-friendly as we might see at face value? There's a lot of these websites selling this or similar brewers, and they're claiming that this is a zero waste alternative to paper filter. Now, that's true in the sense that you're not wasting the paper, but when you do a little bit of a comparison with all the energy that goes into manufacturing and cleaning these things, does it outweigh the amount of energy that goes into producing and throwing out paper filters? Those are also biodegradable, compostable. And so when I think about that, I don't have enough hard data in order to make that true comparison. How many brews are you able to get out of this in comparison to how many papers you might use in the lifetime of this brewer? Some resellers do claim that it will last a lifetime, but again, that's only until it breaks, right? I've heard of others, they're claiming that it will only endure a few of those flame cleaning processes before they're kind of rendered replaceable, let's say. So all that being said, I'd love to give this brewer a few ratings, my own personal opinion from 0 to 10. The first one being coffee deliciousness. I have to give it a 9. I think it's done such a great job at filtering and bringing through some of those really smooth, sweet flavors. Maybe it's the far infrared rays. Maybe it's just the microporous aspects of this brewer. It's a nice taste. Ease of use, I would put it around a 7, and that mostly has to do with, besides the fact that it's delicate, just kind of this grinding sensation when you're brewing. It's not always comfortable. Cleaning after the brew, I would give it a 4. Unfortunately, it's not so easy. The rinsing part isn't too bad, especially if you have a place to put all the grounds, dry it out, which takes also a very long time. But because of the burning, the flame process, the energy required, burning this for 15 minutes, setting it aside for an hour, it's just not that easy. Now, I'll give this a little bit of my own twist here, the Nomad Barista Portability Score. I have to give it a 2. It's not that portable. I have flown with it in extreme cases where I wanted to move it somewhere, but I wouldn't necessarily travel with it. As you can see, it's very delicate, and if you break this part, not even this part, it kind of renders the brewer useless. So yeah, this is something to keep at home, keep on your shelf. It's very beautiful. As a sort of a once in a while brew, impress your friends, impress your tongue. But one last thing I will leave you with, my biggest recommendation for this is actually with tea. So I've been brewing some of my favorite teas in here, loose leaf teas, and I find it actually a much better brewer for that purpose. With the loose leaf, there's not so much clogging. It's gonna give you a really nice, smooth, crisp tea, if you're into that kind of thing. And another thing I wanted to ask, has anyone used this brewer specifically for alcohol? I did hear that it can be used to purify alcohol. Not sure why or when you might want to do that, but if you've done it, leave it in the comments as well. And if you subscribe now, I will see you in the next video.